Have you ever been sitting on your couch, on a Sunday afternoon, totally relaxed, maybe watching a movie or something, and suddenly your phone makes that one specific ding?
Oh, the work email ding?
Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
The ping that you set specifically for emails from your boss, and before you even consciously register what the sound is, your stomach drops.
Right, your heart rate actually spikes.
Yeah, and your palms might even get, like, a little sweaty. You are physically reacting to a threat that isn't even in the room with you.
Your body's basically preparing for battle over an email about spreadsheet formatting.
Right, and you didn't choose to do that. You didn't sit there and think, well, an email from Dave, I should really elevate my blood pressure now.
No, it just happened to you.
It just happened. Welcome to another deep dive on behavioral intelligence con Mara Sánchez. If you are tuning in today, you are likely a dedicated student preparing to conquer the BCBA exam.
And listen, we know exactly what you're going through.
It is genuinely like drinking from a fire hose. It really is.
Yeah.
Studying for this exam is just a completely different beast.
Yeah.
Because you aren't just memorizing definitions, right? You are trying to outsmart test writers who intentionally design questions to blur the lines between, what causes a behavior and what follows it.
Yeah, the exam writers are actively looking for that exact moment you lose your footing between an antecedent and a consequence. They'll give you a scenario that feels incredibly messy and then ask you to categorize it perfectly.
Which is why our mission today is entirely focused on one of the most notoriously tricky areas of the task list. We are looking at Domain B Time 3.
Identify and distinguish between respondent conditioning and operant conditioning.
Exactly. We are treating this deep dive like a survival guide for you. By the end of this, you won't just know the vocabulary. You will understand the underlying mechanics of how the brain wires these behaviors. You will be able to spot the test writer's traps from, like, a mile away.
Because it's really about moving away from rote memorization and actually understanding the fundamental causality of human behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can even begin to understand how our choices change based on the consequences we face, we have to look at that email ping.
Right.
We have to understand the biological behaviors that are already built into us.
So we're starting with respondent conditioning. And for the exam, you'll also see this labeled as classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning.
Just to keep us on our toes with multiple names.
Oh, always. But the foundational rule here is that respondent behavior is reflexive. It is elicited by an antecedent stimulus.
Elicited.
Elicited. Here, the environment is 100% in control of the organism.
So wait, what does this all mean for the word elicit? Because, in everyday language, if I say I elicit a response from someone, I'm kind of just coaxing it out of them. But on the BCBA exam, elicit is a very loaded word, isn't it?
Oh, it is an absolute non-negotiable term on the exam. In behavior analysis, elicit does not mean coaxing. It doesn't mean influencing. It means forcing an involuntary, automatic, biological response.
Okay, so forcing it.
Exactly. If I blow a puff of air into your eyelid blinks. You did not evaluate the puff of air and decide, well, blinking seems like a good idea right now.
Right. I didn't weigh my options.
No, the puff of air, which is the antecedent stimulus, physically forced the blink. It elicited it.
I want to challenge that just to make sure we are drawing the hardest possible line for the listener. Let's say I accidentally touch a burning hot stove.
Okay.
I immediately jerk my hand back, right? Isn't my brain saying, ouch, this hurts? The consequence of touching this is pain, so I will move my hand. Like, doesn't the consequence drive the action there?
That raises a really important question, and honestly, it's a perfect example of how the brain plays tricks on us.
How so?
Well, the feeling of pain is a consequence, yes. But your hand actually jerks away before the pain signal even reaches the conscious decision-making part of your brain.
Wait, really?
Yeah. That flinch is a spinal reflex. It's basically a biological failsafe designed to prevent tissue damage. The heat elicited the flinch before you ever even had the chance to choose to move.
Wow. So I'm basically a meat machine, just running factory-installed hardware programs to keep myself alive.
That is honestly a phenomenal way to look at it. Factory-installed hardware. And there is a specific exam term for that hardware.
What is it?
Phylogeny.
Phylogeny. See, that sounds like a terrifying biology term they throw in just to lower the pass rate.
I know it looks incredibly intimidating on paper, but it just refers to the evolutionary history of our species.
Okay.
Over millions of years, human beings who automatically gasped when they needed oxygen or who automatically pulled their hands away from fire, they survived.
And the ones who didn't, well, they didn't pass on their genes.
Exactly. Phylogenetic behaviors are just the unlearned survival reflexes we all inherit just by being born human.
Okay, but if phylogenetic behaviors are unlearned, how do we get to the conditioning part of respondent conditioning? Because, like, my boss's email ping isn't an evolutionary survival threat.
Right. Cavemen were not running from Outlook notifications.
No, they definitely weren't. So how did my brain wire those two things together?
This is where we bring in Ivan Pavlov. Now, everyone knows the story of Pavlov's dogs salivating at the sound of a bell, right?
Sure, classic psychology 101.
But the mechanism of how that happens is what you need for the exam. Pavlov was originally just studying dog digestion, but he noticed the dogs started drooling before the food even hit their mouths. They were drooling at the sound of the lab assistant's footsteps.
Because the brain is basically a prediction machine. It realized the footsteps always meant food was coming.
Exactly, and the mechanism the brain uses to make that prediction is called stimulus-stimulus pairing.
Stimulus pairing.
Yes, this is how you take a totally neutral stimulus in the environment and turn it into a trigger for a biological reflex.
Walk us through the mechanics of that pairing, because this is a classic area where test writers just love to mix up the acronyms.
Okay, let's use a heavily tested ABA scenario, like an intervention for potty training.
Okay, great example.
So, before any learning happens, human anatomy dictates that a very full bladder naturally causes a child to void. The full bladder is the unconditioned stimulus. Unconditioned just means unlearned.
Right.
And it naturally elicits the unconditioned response, which is voiding.
So that's the factory hardware doing its thing, no learning required.
Exactly. Now, the behavior analyst introduces a neutral stimulus. Let's say it's a little vibrating timer clipped to the child's shirt. Initially, a vibrating timer has absolutely no effect on a child's bladder.
Obviously not.
It is completely neutral. But as part of the protocol, every time that timer vibrates, the caregiver immediately takes the child to the bathroom to void. So we are presenting the neutral stimulus, the vibration, right alongside the unconditioned stimulus, the biological reality of going to the bathroom.
So we are physically wiring those two neurons together through repetition. Vibration equals bathroom. Vibration equals bathroom.
Yes. And through that repeated stimulus pairing, the brain's architecture actually shifts. The previously neutral vibration fundamentally changes. It becomes a conditioned stimulus.
Conditioned meaning it's now learned.
Right. Eventually, the vibration of the timer alone will elicit the physiological urge to go to the bathroom. And we now call that a conditioned response.
So the environment hijacked the biology. The child feels the buzz, and their body automatically reacts. The antecedent stimulus is literally pulling the behavior out of the organism.
Which brings us to a major pivot in our deep dive. Because while respondent conditioning is fascinating, most of what we do as behavior analysts doesn't deal with automatic reflexes.
Right. I mean, we don't spend our days measuring pupil constriction and salivation.
Definitely not.
We spend our days looking at choices.
Yeah.
We are moving from behaviors that are automatically pulled out of us by a buzzer or a bell to behaviors that we actively put out into the world based on what we think is going to happen next.
Welcome to operant conditioning. If respondent conditioning belongs to Pavlov, operant conditioning belongs to B.F. Skinner.
The father of radical behaviorism.
Yes. And Skinner realized that while reflexes explain a tiny fraction of what we do, the vast majority of human behavior is actually driven by what happens after we act.
The consequences.
Yes. Operant behaviors are not elicited. On the exam, the vocabulary word you must use is emitted or evoked.
Emitted.
An organism emits a behavior because of its unique history of consequences. The brain is constantly asking, what happened the last time I tried this?
Right.
If the consequence was reinforcing, the future frequency of that behavior goes up. If the consequence was punishing, the future frequency goes down.
Earlier we used my new favorite analogy. We said, phylogeny is the factory-installed hardware we all share for respondent conditioning. What is the equivalent for operant conditioning?
The term for that is ontogeny. If phylogeny is the hardware, ontogeny is the software apps you download over the course of your specific life.
Oh, I love that.
Your ontogenetic history is 100% unique to you, and it's built entirely by the consequences you've personally experienced.
Let's ground this ontogenetic software in a real-world scenario. I think the vending machine is the classic example here.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So I am hungry. I walk up to a machine. I emit the behavior of putting $1 in, and I press a button. Out pops a bag of my favorite chips. I eat them, I feel great.
Right, so breaking that down behaviorally. Omitting the behavior of putting money in resulted in the presentation of a desired stimulus, the chips.
Yes.
Because that consequence was desirable, the future frequency of you putting money into vending machines when you are hungry increases. That is positive reinforcement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, where so many test takers completely fail. The English language has absolutely ruined the words positive and negative for behavior analysts.
Oh, the everyday definitions are a massive trap on the exam.
Right. When a normal person hears positive, they think of a reward, good vibes. When they hear negative, they think of a penalty, bad vibes. But if you carry those definitions into the BCBA exam, you will totally tank the operant conditioning questions.
You really will.
Let's clear this up once and for all for you listening. In the Skinnerian world, positive simply means adding a stimulus to the environment. Negative simply means removing a stimulus from the environment. It is purely mathematical addition and subtraction. It has zero to do with emotion.
It is strictly math. If we go back to your vending machine, you put the money in, and the machine added chips to your life.
Right.
The behavior of using the machine goes up. Addition that increases behavior equals positive reinforcement. But what happens if you put your dollar in, press the button, and the bag of chips gets stuck right against the glass?
A tragedy, a genuine tragedy.
It really is. But behaviorally, your action of putting money in did not result in adding the chips. Instead, it resulted in the loss of your dollar. A preferred stimulus was subtracted from your environment.
Yeah, my money's gone.
So the next time you walk past that specific broken machine, the future frequency of you putting money into it plummets. Subtraction that decreases behavior is negative punishment.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second because human behavior is way messier than a broken vending machine.
Sure.
If losing money is negative punishment and punishment decreases behavior, why do casinos exist?
Ah.
Why do people sit at slot machines for hours, emitting the behavior of pulling a lever, when the consequence is constant losing their money? Like, shouldn't the subtraction of their money punish the behavior and make them stop?
What a brilliant observation. And you've just hit on why Skinner's work was so revolutionary. A slot machine doesn't just punish you, it uses a very specific, highly addictive trick called a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement.
Okay, a variable ratio.
Right. You lose, you lose, you lose, which should be punishing, but then, unpredictably, you win a small amount. The machine adds a flashing light and a few coins.
Ah, positive reinforcement.
Yes, and that sporadic, unpredictable positive reinforcement is so incredibly powerful that it completely overrides the punishment of losing. Your brain becomes obsessed with chasing the next unpredictable hit.
So the consequence history is actually incredibly complex. The software app I downloaded from the casino is telling me, keep pulling, the reinforcement is coming eventually.
Exactly.
That is fascinating, and it is a perfect example of why consequence control, operant conditioning, dominates our lives.
So let's zoom out and look at the big picture for the exam. We have basically established two distinct frameworks.
Right. Let's do a mental sorting table.
Yes. Column A is respondent conditioning, elicited reflexes controlled by antecedent pairing, rooted in phylogeny, and Pavlov.
And column B is operant conditioning, emitted choices controlled by consequence history, rooted in ontogeny, and Skinner.
Perfect. But the test writers are not going to test these in a vacuum. They aren't going to give you a clean textbook definition of a dog drooling or a rat pressing a lever.
No, they're going to give you scenarios where both types of conditioning are happening at the exact same time.
What's fascinating here is that in real life, antecedent pairing and consequence learning are constantly interacting. To pass domain B.3, you really have to play detective and untangle the web.
Let's do that right now. Give us a complex, messy scenario, and let's break it down the way a student should on the exam.
Okay, let's look at the classic example of a mother using a stern tone of voice. Imagine you are a 7-year-old kid jumping on the couch. Your mom walks in and uses that specific tone. You know the one.
Oh yeah, the one where she uses your first, middle, and last name.
The tone that strikes fear into the soul.
Exactly.
The very second you hear that tone, the antecedent stimulus, your heart rate shoots up, your breathing gets shallow, and you feel a physical knot of dread in your stomach.
Okay, pausing there. That immediate, involuntary physiological reaction. I didn't choose to make my heart race. The tone forced it to happen. That is respondent conditioning.
Correct.
The stern voice is a conditioned stimulus, eliciting a conditioned response of dread, because in my past, That voice has been paired with bad things happening.
Spot on. But the scenario doesn't end there. The moment your heart races, you immediately stop jumping on the couch, you slide off, and you sit down quietly at the table. Why did you do that?
Oh, because my ontogenetic software knows the consequences.
Exactly.
My life experience has taught me that if I continue jumping when she uses that tone, I will lose my screen time or I'll get sent to my room. So sitting down quietly is a choice I am making to avoid a punishment.
Right.
And the act of sitting down is an admitted behavior. So that is operant conditioning.
Look at what just happened. A single antecedent, the mother's tone, served two entirely different functions simultaneously.
Wow.
It acted as a conditioned stimulus to elicit a respondent reflex, and it acted as a signal to evoke an operant avoidance behavior.
That is exactly how they will trick you on the test. They will describe that whole story and then ask what type of conditioning explains the child's heart racing. And if you are rushing, you might see the words sitting down to avoid punishment later in the paragraph and confidently select operant conditioning.
And you'd be wrong, because they only asked about the heart rate.
You have to read the very last sentence of the question carefully. What specific behavior are they asking you to analyze? Let's try one more, because there is a scenario involving registered behavior technicians, RBTs, that trips up almost everyone.
Oh, the pairing scenario.
Yes. When a new RBT starts working with a client, they are told to pair with the child. The RBT is initially a neutral stimulus. The kid doesn't care about them at all. So the RBT brings out the best toys, the snacks, the iPad. They play the kid's favorite games without placing any demands.
They are essentially flooding the environment with unconditioned and highly conditioned reinforcers while placing themselves right in the middle of it.
Right. And eventually, the child's face lights up the moment the RBT walks into the room, even before the toys come out. The RBT has successfully paired themselves and changed their value as a stimulus. Now, my brain tells me that is stimulus pairing. That's Pavlovian. That's respondent conditioning.
And you would be completely correct. Changing the underlying value of the RBT through pairing is a respondent process.
But wait, the whole point of an RBT doing that is so they can eventually place demands on the kid. Once the RBT is highly valued, they can say, match the picture, and when the kid does it, the RBT's praise acts as a positive reinforcement to increase the matching behavior.
Right.
That is operant conditioning.
Yes, it is.
So the RBT is using respondent pairing to fuel operant reinforcement. How on earth do we separate those for a multiple choice question?
Well, what's fascinating here is that you've just described the highest level of clinical application. You are seeing the matrix. But to survive the exam, you need a hard and fast rule. And here's the ultimate exam tip for separating the two. Look at what is controlling the future frequency of the behavior in the question.
The future frequency.
Yes. Ask yourself, is the behavior happening because of what occurred before it, or is the behavior changing because of what occurred after it?
Okay, let me think about that.
If the child's face lights up because the RBT walked in, the antecedent pulled the behavior out. Respondent. But if the child completes a puzzle tomorrow because the RBT gave him a high five today, the consequence is driving the future frequency. Operant.
Antecedent control equals respondent. Consequence control equals operant. That is the golden rule. If you can hold on to that rule, you can untangle any messy paragraph the test raters throw your way.
Just keep your mental buckets clearly defined. Pavlov, elicited reflexes, hardware, and antecedent pairing in one bucket. Skinner, emitted choices, software, and consequence control in the other bucket.
This has been incredibly clarifying. We have completely dismantled domain BEbot 3. Listen, passing the BCBA exam is a monumental task. You are synthesizing thousands of hours of terminology and application. If you are serious about conquering this test and you want to take your exam prep from surviving to genuinely mastering the material, you need to check out our sponsor.
Absolutely.
For the absolute best in ABA learning resources, mock exams, and study guides that break complex topics down just like we did today, you have to follow Amethyst Therapy Services.
They are just phenomenal at cutting through all the academic jargon and giving you the practical, real-world translation you actually need to pass.
Do not let the test writers intimidate you. Go to their website right now at www.amethysttherapyservices.com. That is www.amethyst therapyservices.com.
And they are super responsive, too.
Yeah. If you hit a wall while studying, you can even reach out to them directly with questions at info@amethysttherapyservices.com. Let them help you navigate the muddy waters of exam prep.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, The concepts we discussed today aren't just parlor tricks for passing a multiple choice test. They form the invisible architecture of your entire day.
They really do.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Think about how a single, ordinary object in your house can trigger this entire web of conditioning.
Give us an example to look out for.
Okay, imagine it has been a terribly long, exhausting day. You walk into your kitchen, turn on the light, and sitting right on the counter is a massive piece of your favorite chocolate cake.
Oh, beautiful sight.
Just seeing that cake, the visual stimulus, might elicit your mouth to literally water. You didn't choose to salivate, right?
No, definitely not.
Your phylogenetic hardware paired with your past experience pulled that reflex out of you, respondent conditioning. But that cake is doing so much more. Because of your unique ontogenetic software, your history of consequences, that cake acts as a green light.
It signaled to your brain that a massive rush of sugar is available if you just emit the behavior of grabbing a fork.
Exactly. So the cake is an antecedent that triggers a reflex, but it's also a signal that evokes an operant choice to eat. And let's add one more layer to this.
Okay.
If you haven't eaten all day, your hunger radically increases the value of that cake, making you much more likely to emit the behavior of eating it. But if you just finished a massive Thanksgiving dinner 10 minutes ago, the cake's value drops to 0.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't eat it.
You might look at it, maybe your mouth still waters out of pure reflex, but you don't emit the behavior of picking up the fork.
It's just a piece of cake on a counter, but behaviorally, it is a dynamic, interacting web of biological reflexes, lifetime learning, and immediate physical needs.
So here is my challenge to you. As you go about your day-to-day, observe your own reactions. When you reach for your phone, when you hit the brakes at a yellow light, or when your heart races at an email ping. Pause and ask yourself, is this a reflex that was told out of me by my environment? Or is this a choice I am making because of the consequences I've experienced in my past?
Respondent or operant, elicited or emitted, hardware or software. Once you start seeing the world through that lens, you realize that behavior isn't just a list of terms in a textbook. It is the fluid, dynamic code that runs our entire lives.
Absolutely.
And now you have the tools to read that code. You know how to spot the difference between the biology you were born with and the behaviors you've learned to emit. That is exactly what you need to crush Domain B3 on exam day.
You've got this.
Keep studying, keep observing the world around you, and remember to check out www.amethysttherapyservices.com for all your prep needs. We will catch you on the next deep dive.